So after the reveal of Tesla's Optimus Bot Generation 2 a couple of weeks ago, many from the Tesla Bot engineering team have been coming out sharing more and more information. Milan Kovac, director of engineering, had a long post on X explaining what it took for the team to make so much progress. He also made statements showing how Tesla was able to design, train, and deploy the very first end-to-end neural nets for humanoid robots, which was demonstrated to autonomously perform tasks. Having said all this, there were points he made that made some believe that perhaps the legs and walking may not yet be ready for prime time, and a few others points he made, which we'll explore more today. We've got Hans Nelson joining us, and he and I have been covering these bots movements quite significantly, and would love to get his opinion. He did also participate in this thread conversation with Milan, so love to see your points. Welcome, Hans.
Thanks for having me, Herbert.
So Milan Kovac, and I've seen quite a number of them, other Tesla engineering teams, just sharing more information about the Tesla bot that they seem to be incredibly proud to have launched. So Milan says 2023 has been awesome for Optimus. We've moved from an exploratory prototype, Bumblebee, to a more stable Tesla designed platform, Optimus Gen 1. We've improved our locomotion stack, frequently walking off gantry without falls and with a faster, increasingly more human-like walking gait. We've built a very low latency and high fidelity teleoperation system used to collect AI training data of the bot imitating humans performing certain tasks. We've designed, trained, and deployed some of the first end-to-end neural nets for humanoid robots ever demonstrated to autonomously perform tasks requiring coordinated control of humanoid torso, arms, and full hands with fingers. And then he said, we've designed and built yet another upgraded version of the bot, Optimus Gen 2, adding an articulated neck, revamped hands with tactile sensing, and a tighter integration of harnesses and actuators and electronics. So quite a bit of progress in just those short months. Any thoughts on those statements?
Yeah, it's just, very impressive. Like you said, that they were able to do this all over the course of the last year. That's, from where we started with that Bumblebee, Bumble C prototype to the Gen 2 is a huge progress physically from a mechanical standpoint. Obviously, from a refinement standpoint and the manufacturability, obviously, Bumblebee was just really off the shelf components. So they had to do a lot to be able to develop those actuators that they have in-house. Not only build the prototypes of those actuators and kind of refine them and their control systems, but really get them to the point where I think that they should roughly either they are already or will in the very near future. I think those actuators are going to be at the point where they're ready to begin mass manufacturing them. And that's one of the key bottlenecks from an overall manufacturing standpoint. A lot of the other electronics are going to they're going to have access to larger volumes of those things. And so, yeah, the actuators are one of the manufacturing bottlenecks on how many of these they can produce and at what rate. And so it's good to see those things continuing to be refined and get to a point where they're close to being ready to make them in large volumes.
Yeah. This is, I just wanted to remind people what Bumblebee looked like, which is the very beginning. That's what it looked like,
Yep.
back then. There you go. Hard to see. And then Gen 1, that's what it looked like. And then finally we got Gen 2. Brilliant movement. Huge progress. Okay, so let's go back to what he says made this possible. I mean, literally only Tesla has all the ingredients to make this work. And so let's take a look what he says. He said, oops, sorry. What am I doing here? Okay, what made this possible? A fantastic group of passionate people working hard and well together. Okay. A scrappy, flexible, flat, and bureaucracy-free startup-like operating structure. That is big deal. A lot more bigger deal than people realize. A large-scale AI training and evaluation infrastructure. Years worth of prior work on technology foundations for our cars, on actuators, batteries, AI chips, and autopilot software. I don't know how any other startup could possibly have all this. This is just gives them that major lead. The backing and vision of a CEO who doesn't shy away from tackling tough problems for the better of humanity.
So let me just stop for a second right there. one of the things, most of the times, a effort like this inside of a large company, we've seen this, for example, we'll go back to Kodak. Kodak developed the digital camera. They made it in-house. They invented it. They had all the patents, and they failed to operationalize that and bring it to
Right.
market because it was something that they viewed as being in competition to their core business. And what we see here from Tesla is not only are they operating this company like its own startup inside of Tesla, kind of like a Google moonshot project, um, but I think that Elon is one of the few leaders who is capable of allowing this project, not only giving it the resources that it needs and the room to breathe, but really as the core focus long term to grow this product from something that will start out as a small and people will say inconsequential part of their business, but something that can eclipse the overall size of the rest of the business in the long term. And he has that vision of
Yeah.
how that trajectory plays out over time and the commitment to stick with it. And so I think that, a lot of companies, a project like this being inside of a large company, it would kill it. But I think that Tesla is an exception to that rule because normally you can see big companies and make those arguments that, hey, they have all the resources that they need to be successful. But then you watch them from the external point of view and those things don't actually happen. And it's because of internal dynamics inside the company that prevent it from working. And I don't think that Tesla is going to fall prey to those types of internal dynamics because Elon has created such a different organization from a cultural standpoint that knows how to maintain that fresh day zero thinking, like Jeff Bezos talks about, that is also long term focused and able to execute over the long term on something that is completely new and outside of the existing, I would say, P&L or balance sheet, the major business lines and categories. So yeah, I wanted to point that out.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's not just that it's going to succeed. It's actually the progress. It's unbelievable that in just 2 years you went from this thing that they're just playing with to here. But I love the way that he pointed out that this is built on the shoulders of all of the technology and experience that the company has, not only in Tesla but in SpaceX as well. And
Hmm.
then they come together. They're single-minded and they have this progress. Now, one of the statements he does say later, which is like, there's that list. He created this list of all the things that made them successful and they made them be able to make this progress. Then he said, when the time is right, our manufacturing lines will be added to that list. So there's a little confusing here, right? What does he mean that our manufacturing lines will be added to this list? So he basically has a list of what made this progress possible, the great team, great bureaucratic-free operating structure. You have the AI training. You've got all these technology. You got your CEO, and eventually the manufacturing lines. I take that to mean that once the bot is now in full-scale production, then the fact that they have manufacturing lines that no one else does is going to make them just completely separated from any other company out there. Or did you take that to mean that, oh, we're going to be able to test this in the manufacturing lines?
So my interpretation of this statement is that there are still aspects of the prototyping development phase that are not complete and they don't feel like they're ready to be overwhelmed with the number of bots that they have. I think this is supported by the positions that they're hiring for, that they're trying to have these one, even the fact that they have that teleoperation effort where they have this very low latency thing where a person can operate the bot remotely. um, these types of things signal to me that the overall control system for the bot, that it's really the brains that they are working on, and that the because you don't need more bots, um just like an unlimited number of bots, where at some point they will be able to crank these out at hundreds of thousands a year, probably millions a year. And the design is made so that physically they can manufacture in that scale basically very easily. But you don't need to manufacture that many if, for the time being, you're bottlenecked by having to do training that relies on human labor, just like in the early days of the autopilot team. They had to have, and they still have a labeling team. It's not that they have done away with it, but they have managed to scale the auto labeling effort in a way that's not dependent just on the number of people that they have. And I think that right now the training of Optimus Bot is going to go through a phase where the software of Optimus is dependent on scaling of human trainers. Whether you want to call them senseis or whatever, that there's going to be human in the loop training for a season, and that during that time you don't need 10,000 Optimus bots. You only need a few hundred, a few thousand potentially. Um, and so while they're ready in the long term to be able to manufacture tons of them, once they have the software perfected, that for the next year, I think, manufacturing progress will be slower, and we'll just be looking at what is the software capable of. That said, so that is a thought that lives in one half of my brain. The thought that lives in the other half of my brain is watching people like Figure AI and Google's DeepMind continue to put out research in the embodied artificial intelligence space based on these multimodal LLM architectures that they then give a body to, and it's very impressive the amount of capability they have, and they have an understanding of the world already. They are able to do complex long-term planning. But I think that there's a lot of work to be done still on the safety and repeatability, that whereas you might be able to get one of those systems to, you know, 4 out of 5 or 3 out of 6 times, whatever, to accomplish something autonomously in a way that is sufficient. I think, if you want to put this in a manufacturing setting in a factory for Tesla, it needs to be able to do that, without any hiccups or failures, basically over the course of an 8-hour shift. And so that repeatability is going to be a challenge that they have to solve in order for this to be something that is really useful in a manufacturing setting. And I think that that's going to be still the first application that they really focus on. It's got to do that well before they're going to start generalizing beyond that use case. And so, yeah, I think that, I mean, my interpretation is that we're still going to be somewhat limited on the application and training of the software of Optimus for a while still, and that once they pass that point, then they'll go ahead and put the pedal to the metal on just growing manufacturing for Optimus, and that the inflection will be incredible. They'll go from, making a few hundred or a few thousand of these to just pumping them out tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even millions in a relatively a ramp that's much, 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 much faster than we've seen with vehicles.
Yeah. Yep. So all of that's right. And then, but yeah, I said the list will include the manufacturing lines. This is the list of things that's going to, why they were able to progress so quickly, because this is something that few other companies have. So that's great to see
Yeah.
this. He says Tesla's one of the very rare places on earth with all the critical ingredients to make this actually happen, and the potential to shape a future of abundance for everyone. This is a very big statement. I think us Tesla retail investors are very familiar, aware of this, but it really is true. And it's hard for others to understand. We compare so many Tesla bots with so many other bots out there, and you see how great they look. But you have to stop and think, do they have the brains? Do they have the hands? Do they have the manufacturing lines so they can build this at scale? Do they have the supercomputers to build, to build the AI required to teach? Do they have the team? And if you're a startup, you don't have the funding to support yourself versus Tesla. This is just, a small little blip in their funding that they've got. Okay, so then Machine says this, right? He pointed out this one sentence in that list that Milan had, and he said, listen to the sentence: end-to-end neural nets for humanoid robots ever demonstrated to autonomously perform tasks requiring coordinated control of humanoid torso, arms, and full hands with fingers. Why did he not say that this end-to-end neural net is also helping for the legs and balancing? So Phil, this guy named Phil Truby, says, you're probably right. End-to-end is harder than it sounds. It takes humans who have like 7 times orders of magnitude faster learning rates about a year to learn how to walk. Walking is hard. Machine says, yes, I did my PhD in human biomechanics, especially in control of lower extremities in challenging balancing tasks. It will be the most difficult challenge for bipedal robots, so I'm specifically focused on its progress and looking for verbiage like this to better understand. You replied and said, I have to agree with your interpretation of the statement above. They probably have not solved end-to-end control from the hips down yet. And this statement is also very important. We've improved our locomotion stack, frequently walking off gantry without falls and with a faster, increasingly more human-like walking gait. Also known as, this thing is not ready to operate in a factory without falling down far too often to be useful.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yeah. So I think that Machine is right to point out that they're not using end to end there, which means that those are still networks that are hand coded. They are, software 1.0 and written with heuristics. And that is a very difficult way to write this. Obviously, one of the things that we know, people always talk about how good Boston Dynamics is in the Atlas robot, but what they don't realize is that so often, they have written these advanced programs for these things and they go to record them, and you get to see the one time that it worked correctly out of tons and tons of times when the thing fell over and it didn't, it lost its balance, it wasn't able to complete the task, whatever it was. And so they can do something where, you can edit a video together out of 1,000 takes and make it look like it's able to do this thing in a very seamless way. And that's just not how the um, heuristic code performs on a functional day-to-day basis. And so that's what I'm kind of reading from that, is that frequently walking off gantry doesn't mean that it's always walking without. And when they say gantry, it's just the thing that, they've got a tether on the back of the robot and it's held up by a cable, so that if it slips, that it doesn't fall. So it's still on gantry some of the time, and it doesn't have end-to-end control of its legs, its hips, its lower spine, and all of those things are necessary for it to move around anywhere. And I think they're not going to solve it until they get that done end to end. And then once they solve it, they need to get the reliability of it to where it's not frequently walking off gantry. It's always walking off gantry. It needs to always walk off gantry and it needs to never fall. Once you can go always off gantry and never fall, well, then you've got something that you can really work with. Because if you are putting it in a factory and it does, now, I mean, you may be able to put it in a factory at a station where it doesn't have to move at all, and that might work just fine. But if it's got to move anywhere, which is going to be the majority, like it's not a humanoid robot if it can't move without falling. It's then a stationary robot. And then the question is, well, why don't you just put, a more traditional robot in its place that is stationary anyways? Um, so unfortunately, I think that's kind of where they're at today. But we've talked about this throughout the episode. They are moving so fast right now. They're making rapid progress. This is stuff that they're going to get figured out. But I think that this is a key piece to monitor, just like Machine said, that once they have the end-to-end solved and they can walk off gantry without falls for 8 hours at a time, that's a huge hurdle that allows this thing to be super, super, super useful in a number of cases. So, yeah, I think that I'm excited to see their progress. If they are already able to do things like pick up that egg in the video, that means that they have a refinement in their ability to incorporate sensor feedback into their control system, that if they can apply what they're doing now with the hands to end-to-end networks in the feet, they've added all those extra sensors now in the toes. And I think that's one of the reasons why they haven't solved this well yet, is because from an architecture standpoint, they didn't have everything they needed. They needed that new articulated toe box that they've got. They needed the sensors for the torque and the force in the feet, in order to really improve their overall locomotion stack. So now they have all of the sensors and the data, and they know how to do these end-to-end networks in the upper body. They just have to transfer what they've done now to the lower body. And I think this is something we should see in the near future.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. They're going to progress quickly. So that's new information we found, that they don't have end to end in the lower torso. There's a company called Giant AI, exists today. Got tremendous amount of funding, and they are purposely only making torso up. There's no need, they think, for the walking, because they calculate in their business model the number of jobs available where you just have a kind of a human like hands and be able to pick and place right on a conveyor belt that's moving. There's already jobs available for that in factories. Think
Mhm.
about those people that are always just standing there, let's say picking fruit. They don't necessarily have to walk very far. They just stand there, and then they just, identify the bad fruit and they move things like
Yep.
that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd really be
So,
curious to know inside of Tesla's factory, what
mm,
the size of that use case is, because just I know that Tesla's factory is going to be the development platform. They're not going to,
yeah.
sell these Optimus bots to a company like that Giant AI would be able to service right now. Um, so the question is, how many of those stations does Tesla have where they could go ahead and start putting these things and they could start, learning
Well,
and doing tasks?
I've done a show with Scott Walter, who owned two robotics companies in the past. These are the big KUKA robots that are stationary, and then they grab.
Hmm.
Almost every factory has it. They're stationary and they move. And then in that video that we did, he explained that there are roles for those stationary robots. There's roles for humanoid bots who can walk, and there are roles for
Hmm.
for bots that have wheels. And
Yeah.
so the humanoid bots that walk is kind of in between the stationary ones. Many times you just need the stationary. But then there's times when you need to be able to move around a little bit. But if you are going to move a lot, let's say in an Amazon warehouse, then that's why they have millions of bots that have wheels, because that's
Yep.
faster to move far away, especially if it's a flat factory floor. But there are roles for humanoid bots. And when they don't need to walk more than 6 feet. So
Yep.
there are going to be jobs now that Tesla bot can do today, despite what we just read. That's we'll see more, but that's I just want to explain that doesn't mean that we're not going to be available to have these untested today.
Mhm.
Okay, this is always fun. Any new news about Optimus Gen 2 platform? This is directly from Milan, who is the director of engineering at Tesla. They're just so proud, and they should be. They deserve it. Look how fast this progress has happened in 2 years. And take a look at this list. And like you said, this is the only place. Tesla is one of the only rare places in the world this can happen. And they progress so quickly. I just can't wait to see what happens in a year from now, in 2 years from now. And you and I, we're going to follow this closely, Hans. Every time there's a new update, we'll get an update, talk about it some more. Thank you so much, Hans. Follow him on his YouTube channel, Hans C. Nelson. Thanks, everybody. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.